Have you ever thought about this? A missile that explodes in the Middle East causes your morning coffee to go cold. A ship that sinks in the Red Sea delays the toy you bought for your child. A tanker set ablaze in any strait inflates your electricity bill. These are not conspiracy theories. They are modern scenes of an ancient game. What I will tell you today is that the concept dismissed in history books as merely a trade route is, in reality, the bloodiest, most complex and least understood power game in human history. The truth is that Houthi attacks, the Red Sea crisis, semiconductor shortages and energy wars are all modern versions of a single ancient formula. Because no matter how much humanity advances, no matter how warfare methods change, the essence of strategy never changes. In other words, whoever controls the route controls the world. This rule was absolute 2,000 years ago, and it remains absolute today. Now, for a moment, let us go to a city on the North African coast, Carthage. Most history books introduce this city merely as the enemy Rome defeated. But Carthage's real power did not come from its army. It came from holding the straits, chokepoints, and port cities through which the Mediterranean breathed. The western coast of Sicily, the strategic coastline of North Africa, the sea passages opening to the rich mining regions of the Iberian Peninsula. All of these were under the control of Carthaginian merchants, sailors, and mercenaries. Because it held this control, Carthage achieved enormous economic power with a much smaller population than Rome, far more limited agricultural land, and far fewer soldiers. That is precisely why war with Rome became inevitable. When two great powers vie for the same strait at the same time, it is not merely a story of military rivalry. It contains a much deeper and more painful truth. The moment Carthage lost control of maritime trade, its powerful army, rich treasury, and skillful diplomacy became useless. Because losing economic chokepoints is like losing lungs for a state. A power that cannot breathe is doomed to collapse sooner or later. Now let us turn the same lens to the medieval world and see what we find. Yes, Venice. How did Venice, a tiny cluster of swampy islands, become the richest city in Europe? The answer is the same: control of chokepoints and passages. The Venetians seized the narrow points of the Adriatic Sea through which east-west trade passed, the critical islands of the Aegean, and the key passages of trade agreements with Byzantium. By holding these passages, they took a share from every caravan, every ship's cargo, every sack of spices. They were not fighting, they were simply controlling the passage. And this was more than enough for power. During the same period, Arab merchants knew the wind corridors of the Indian Ocean, the natural sea routes created by monsoon seasons, and the vital passages of the Strait of Hormuz so well that at every link in the chain delivering ginger, cloves, pepper, and cinnamon to all of Europe, there was an Arab trader's hand. These merchants did not establish states or maintain armies, yet they determined the direction of the world's wealth. This is perhaps the purest form of power, controlling without being seen. Now let us move quickly forward to 1869, to the turning point when the Suez Canal was opened. Humanity was not merely opening a canal, it was creating a new axis on which the world would be rebalanced. This canal ended journeys that took months around the African continent and dramatically shortened the distance between Asia and Europe. Most importantly, whoever controlled the canal effectively held about 8% of world trade and controlled the true heart valve of the global economy. Throughout history, Britain, France, Egypt, the United States, and the Soviet Union played games over this valve. Wars broke out and governments fell. The 1956 crisis, when NASA nationalized the canal, was not merely a canal issue. It was a chokepoint war, and in that war, real power lay not in weapons, but in the capacity to block passage. Now, after this historical perspective, let us come to the present. In the Red Sea, the Houthis strike commercial ships with missiles and drones launched from Yemen. On the surface, these attacks are labeled terrorism or regional conflict, but such a reading is dangerously superficial, because the Houthis are doing exactly what Venice, Carthage, and medieval Arab traders did. They are holding a choke point. The Red Sea opens to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's most critical maritime passages. Most containers traveling from Asia to Europe pass through this strait, and when passage becomes dangerous, major shipping companies must change routes. Ships begin to circle Africa. Journey times extend by weeks. Fuel costs and insurance premiums soar, and consumer prices inflate worldwide in a chain reaction. In other words, a missile fired in Yemen increases costs for a shopkeeper in Istanbul, delays a toy order for a child in Amsterdam, and risks the drug supply of a hospital in Lagos. This is not exaggeration. It is the mathematical result of the fragility of global supply chains. And here a strange and unsettling harmony between history and today emerges. 1,000 years ago, wars were fought to control the routes through which pepper and cinnamon passed. Today, they are fought over the routes of semiconductors and crude oil. Only the tools have changed. Microchips instead of spices, missiles instead of swords, unmanned submarines instead of warships. But the formula is the same. Cut the route, choke the economy, come to the table stronger. To understand this reality, it is not enough to know who the Houthis are or what they want. The key question is this: who is using this choke point strategy? Why? And as part of which larger chess game? History teaches us that small actors at choke points rarely act on their own behalf. They are usually proxies of great powers, nodes in larger networks. Trying to understand events without seeing these networks is like attempting to captain a ship while looking only at the visible tip of an iceberg. Viewed from this perspective, Iran's support for the Houthi group clarifies the picture. Without directly endangering its own territory, Iran could exert pressure on Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Persian Gulf. This is a perfect modern adaptation of the ancient mercenary strategy. Keep the choke point under pressure without dirtying your own hands, challenge your rivals, and come to negotiations from a position of strength. However, another question cannot be ignored. Are not the Western military presence in the region, the geopolitical tensions surrounding Suez, and US Middle East policy also moves in the same ancient game played by different actors? When the US Navy patrols the Persian Gulf, it is not there solely for freedom and democracy. It is also there to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. About 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait, and if it closes, the global economy would suffer not only through energy prices, but also through psychological fragility, market panic, and cascading recession. At this point, a philosophical question arises. Is there an end to this ancient war of choke points? No matter how advanced technology becomes, no matter how digital trade routes grow, as long as dependence on physical infrastructure continues, the strategic importance of choke points will not disappear. Today, more than 90% of internet traffic travels through fiber optic cables laid on ocean floors, and the critical nodes through which these cables pass create potential choke points just like Suez or Bab el-Mandeb. The battlefield has expanded, but the logic of the war has not changed. Consider also the Taiwan Strait, which separates the island producing most of the world's advanced semiconductors from the mainland. If this strait were controlled or passage became risky, the global economy would suffer a shock, not only in electronics, but across automotive, defense, medical devices, and renewable energy infrastructure. This is not an abstract threat, but a concrete scenario that keeps strategists awake at night. China's persistent claim over Taiwan is not only a matter of nationalism, but also a calculation to control the world's most critical technological choke point. All of this tells us something important. Although the global economy appears to be a complex, multi-actor, multi-centered network, its key nodes are extremely fragile, and these vulnerabilities cluster around geographic, technological, and geopolitical choke points. Whoever holds these choke points, or can credibly threaten them, sits at the political table with disproportionate power. At this stage, we must ask a deeper moral question. What is the role of ordinary people, consumers, workers, citizens, in this power equation, and who pays the price of this game? In the fall of Carthage, the victory of Rome, the rise of Venice, the control of the spice route, and the Suez crises, the real cost was almost always borne by those who neither devised the strategy nor profited from the choke points. Ordinary people became pawns in the games of merchants and generals, Carthaginian farmers, Yemeni civilians, Asian workers dependent on cheap goods carried through the Red Sea. Choke point wars appear cold and mathematical, but their human cost is always warm, tangible, and often invisible. That is why this story is not only a geopolitical analysis, but also a question of justice. While the forces that determine the flow of global trade calculate their moves without asking who will bear the resulting fragility, crises, inflation, and shortages, billions of people pay the invisible costs without even knowing the rules of the game. Now let us lean back and look at the big picture. The Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, tensions in the Taiwan Strait, the power struggle over Hormuz, the growing strategic importance of the Northern Sea route due to climate change. These are not separate news stories, but simultaneous manifestations of a single ancient formula. Humanity has been playing the same game since Carthage, Venice, and the spice route. The scenes, actors, and weapons change, but the name of the game remains the same: hold the choke point, rule the world. And perhaps the greatest illusion is this: we think we have outgrown it, that globalization, free trade, and the digital economy have lifted us beyond this ancient trap. Yet each new crisis, each supply chain shock whispers the same truth. Physical geography has not changed, human nature has not changed, and history is smiling somewhere, rewriting the same pages with a different pen. Whoever controls the route controls the world. This rule was valid yesterday. It is valid today. And unless humanity recognizes this game and develops structural solutions, it will remain valid tomorrow as well.